My name is Elias, and the Blackwood Forest has always been my refuge. That crisp October morning, the scent of pine and damp earth was sharper than usual as I ventured deeper than my usual trail, chasing a rare bird call. Sunlight struggled through, the dense canopy painting the forest floor in shifting patterns of gold and shadow. The silence, the profound stillness of ancient woods, was both comforting and unnerving. I'd walked these paths for years, but something felt, listened to. It wasn't fear, not yet, but a prickling awareness, like the forest itself held its breath. Then I saw it, a flash of unnatural crimson against the mossy trunk of a giant oak. Not a flower, not a berry. It was a torn piece of fabric, high-quality wool, snagged on rough bark. And it looked startlingly fresh. My refuge suddenly felt like a stage, and I wasn't sure if I was the audience or the performer. The bird call forgotten, a single question echoed in the sudden quiet. Who else was out here, and why did they leave a piece of themselves behind? Chapter 2. Footprints, the discovery of the fabric, coiled a spring of unease in my gut. Instead of turning back, a stubborn curiosity, mixed with a dawning sense of responsibility, pushed me forward. I scanned the ground, my eyes now attuned to disturbance. 20 paces beyond the oak, partially obscured by fallen leaves, I found them. Footprints. Not the clean tread of hiking boots, but uneven, scuffed impressions, one deeper than the other, as if the person was limping or carrying something heavy. They veered sharply off the established path, plunging into a thicket choked with brambles and young saplings. The message was clear. Someone wasn't just hiking. They were fleeing or hiding. The forest sounds, the rustle of squirrels, the distant woodpecker, now felt like camouflage for something else. My own breathing seemed too loud. Should I call out, offer help? Or was I following the trail of danger itself? The silence offered no answer, only the oppressive weight of the trees and the erratic path disappearing into the gloom. Pushing through, the clutching thorns felt like entering another world. Sweat stung my eyes despite the chill. The limping footprints led relentlessly onward, growing fainter but still discernible on the softer ground near a trickling stream. Then, the undergrowth abruptly gave way to a small, hidden clearing. Sunlight, weak but direct, illuminated a scene that froze me mid-step. In the center lay the remnants of a small, recent fire, cold ash and charred twigs. Scattered around it were items that didn't belong. An expensive-looking, now mud-smeared, leather satchel lying open and empty. A single, delicate gold earring glinting near a tree root, and a man's polished dress shoe, incongruous against the wild backdrop. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just a lost hiker. This spoke of haste, perhaps violence, abandonment. The satchel's emptiness screamed theft. The single earring hinted at struggle. The fire suggested someone stayed here, maybe hiding, maybe recovering. But where were they now? The footprints ended here. Panic fluttered in my chest. Turn back for help? Or search the immediate area? Every rustle in the surrounding woods felt like a threat. I was no longer an observer. I was caught in the middle of an unfinished, terrifying story. Chapped in the reason, warred with adrenaline. Calling out felt reckless. Whoever left these signs might be desperate, dangerous, or even injured nearby. Moving silently, heart hammering against my ribs, I circled the clearing. Near the far edge, partially hidden by ferns, I spotted disturbed earth. Not an animal dig, but something shallow and hastily covered. Using a stick, my hands trembling, I carefully scraped away the loose soil. Beneath it wasn't a body, thank God, but a bundle wrapped in oilskin. Inside, nestled like a secret, were passports, a stack of euros, and a small, encrypted phone. Relief washed over me, quickly followed by confusion. Someone had buried valuables here. Why? Were they coming back? Or had they been forced to leave them? As I stared at the trove, a distant sound shattered the tense quiet. Not an animal, but the distinct, sharp crack of a snapping branch, too loud and too deliberate, coming from the direction I'd entered the clearing. Someone was here. Now, were they the owner of the satchel? The one who left the footprint? Or someone else entirely? There was no time to rebury the bundle. Clutching it tightly, the cold plastic of the phone digging into my palm, I did the only thing I could. I melted back into the thickest part of the forest, away from the sound, the clearing, and the lingering ghosts of its secrets. The refuge was gone. Now, the Blackwood held its breath with me, waiting for the next move in a game I never asked to play. The story wasn't over. It had just pulled me into its dark heart. The crunch of gravel under tires faded into oppressive silence as Ben killed the engine. Before them, Willow Creek Woods swallowed the narrow Forest Service road whole. Late afternoon sun filtered through a dense canopy of ancient oaks and pines, cast long, distorted shadows that seemed to reach for their battered SUV. The air, thick with the scent of pine resin and damp earth, felt heavy, unnaturally still. "We're seriously camping here?" Chloe whispered, her knuckles white on the armrest. Her usual adventurous spark was dimmed by the forest's watchful gloom. Deepest, darkest, just like we wanted, right? Ben forced a grin, but it didn't reach. His eyes. He scanned the trees, seeing only shifting patterns of green and brown. Said it was secluded, perfect for stargazing. Mark, ever practical, was already unloading deer. Secluded is an understatement. Didn't see another car for 20 miles. Phone signal died 10 minutes back. He hefted a cooler. Let's find a spot before it gets dark. That ranger mentioned a clearing near the creek. The promised clearing was there, carpeted in soft moss and ferns, nestled beside the chuckling Willow Creek. Yet the cheerful sound felt out of place. As they pitched tents, the forest pressed closer. No birds sang. No squirrels chattered. Only the creek's murmur and the unsettling rustle of leaves high above, though there was no wind. Chloe kept glancing over her shoulder, jumping at the snap of a twig dot. As dusk bled into night, their campfire became a fragile island of light in an ocean of black. The flames danced, casting monstrous, leaping shadows on the surrounding trees. Laughter died quickly. The silence wasn't empty. It felt occupied, waiting. Chapter 2. Whispers in the dark sleep was impossible. Chloe lay rigid in her tent, listening. The forest sounds had changed. The creek's chuckle now sounded like hushed, wet voices. The rustling in the canopy wasn't wind. It was something moving deliberately, purposefully, just beyond the firelight's reach. A low growl vibrated through the ground, more felt than heard. It wasn't a bear. It was deeper, guttural, resonating in Chloe's bones. She clamped a hand over her mouth, stifling a whimper. Ben sat bolt upright in his sleeping bag. "Did you hear that?" His voice was a taut wire dot mark, outside tending the dying. Fire didn't answer. He was staring fixedly into the darkness beyond the circle of light. His face was bloodless. "Mark?" Ben hissed, unzipping his tent flap. Mark slowly raised a trembling finger, pointing between two massive gnarled oaks. "Eyes," he breathed, the word barely audible, reflecting the fire. Low to the ground. But not right. Ben strained too. See, nothing. Then for a fraction of a second, two pinpricks of sickly yellow-green light flashed, then vanished. A cold dread, deeper than any night chill, seeped into his core. Something was circling them. Chloe scrambled out of her tent, joining them by the fire, her breath frosting in the suddenly icy air. "We need to leave. Now." Before Mark could agree, a blood-curdling shriek tore through the night. Not human, not animal, but a sound of pure predatory malice. It came from the direction of the creek, shockingly close. Their flashlight beams, slicing through the blackness, found nothing but trees and swirling mist. But the feeling of being watched intensified, multiplied. They weren't just being observed. They were being hunted. Chapter 3. Shadows Take Form panic seized them. They scrambled, abandoning tents, grabbing only essentials, backpacks, one water bottle, the strongest flashlight. The SUV was their only hope. A mile down the dark, overgrown path. They ran, stumbling over roots, branches clawing at their clothes. The forest was alive with movement. Things crashed through the undergrowth, just out of sight, keeping pace. Heavy, wet breathing rasped nearby. The air reeked of musk and something metallic, like old blood. "Don't look back," Ben yelled, his flashlight. Beam bouncing wildly. Chloe dared a glance. In a fleeting sweep of light, she saw it. Not clearly, but enough. A hulking shape, matted with dark fur or coarse hide, moving with impossible speed on too many limbs. Its elongated snout snapped at the air, revealing rows of jagged yellowed teeth. It melted back into the shadows before she could scream, burst into a smaller clearing. Mark, leading, skidded to a halt. Blocking the path ahead, silhouetted against the faint moonlight, filtering through a break in the trees, stood another creature. It was taller, standing semi-erect on powerful hind legs, its shoulders grotesquely hunched. Its head slowly turned towards them, and they saw the same malevolent yellow eyes. Now filled with chilling intelligence. It let out a guttural chittering sound, answered by others from the flanks. They were surrounded. "Through there." Mark pointed, desperately, to a gap in the undergrowth, away from the path. "To the creek. Maybe we can cross." It was a desperate amble. They plunged into the thick brush, thorns tearing at their skin. The creatures howled in fury, the crushing pursuit intensifying. The sound of the creek grew louder, a roaring torrent now. They stumbled out onto the slippery, rocky bank. The water was wide, fast, and icy cold. Chapter 4. The price of sanctuary. The creatures emerged from the trees, not rushing, but spreading out along the bank. 5 of them. Their forms were clearer now in the moonlight. Twisted parodies of wolves and bears, fused with something insectile and utterly wrong. Saliva dripped from their jaws. Their intelligent eyes tracked every flinch, every terrified breath. The tallest one, the semi-erect leader, took a step forward, its claws scraping on stone. It tilted its head, emitting a low, rumbling growl that vibrated in their chests. It wasn't just hunger in its gaze. It was calculation, cruel amusement. Ben fumbled for the small can of bear spray clipped to his belt. It felt laughably inadequate. Chloe sobbed silently, her eyes fixed on the churning water. Mark searched the opposite bank frantically. Steep, slick rock. No escape. The leader creature suddenly lunged, not at them, but towards Mark's dropped backpack. Powerful jaws clamped, down, shaking it violently. Supplies scattered. Then, with terrifying strength, it hurled the pack into the raging creek, where it was instantly swallowed. A message. A warning. Ben raised the bear spray, hand trembling. "Stay back." The creature ignored him, its gaze locking onto Chloe. It took another deliberate step. The others mirrored it, tightening the noose. The creek roared beside them, a cold, uncaring god. The forest behind was a wall of darkness and teeth. The fragile sanctuary of the clearing was a lifetime away. Their campfire was ashes. The SUV was an impossible dream. The leader creature lowered its massive head, muscles coiling beneath its hide. A low, anticipatory growl started deep in its chest, echoed by its pack. The yellow eyes, filled with ancient predatory hunger, held. Theirs. The chilling truth settled upon Ben, Chloe, and Mark, colder than the creek spray. Willow Creek Woods wasn't just deep and dark. It was alive. And they hadn't found sanctuary. They had trespassed in its larder. The final, bone-shaking roar of the pack leader drowned out the rushing water, and the thing surged forward from the shadows. I remember the crisp, thin air biting at our cheeks as we finally reached the high peaks. We, Leo, the ever-enthusiastic planner. Maya, quiet but fiercely observant. Ben, the joker with surprisingly steady hands. And Sarah, whose calm logic usually grounded us, had dreamed of this remote camping trip for months. A map promised pristine lakes and ancient forests untouched by crowds. We pitched our tents in a small clearing nestled amongst colossal pines, their gnarled roots gripping the steep mountainside like old bones. The sun dipped early behind the jagged peaks, plunging us into deep, velvety twilight broken only by our crackling fire and a sky impossibly dense with stars. The first sign wasn't a sight, but a sound. As we settled into hushed conversation, a low, guttural rumble echoed through the trees, seeming to vibrate in our chests. It wasn't thunder. The sky was clear. It came again, closer, followed by a sharp snapping sound high above us. We looked up, flashlights piercing the darkness, catching only glimpses of thick branches swaying violently against the starfield, as if something heavy had just leapt between them. Unease, cold and sharp, prickled my skin. Leo dismissed it as probably just a big owl or a falling branch, but Maya's eyes, wide and reflecting the firelight, scanned the impenetrable blackness between the trees. That night, the comforting rustle of leaves sounded more like stealthy footsteps, and the wind carried faint, chilling whispers that defied the ear. Sleep was thin and fractured. Chapter 2. The path that wasn't morning brought mist, thick and white, swallowing the lower slopes and turning our clearing into an island in a ghostly sea. The oppressive feeling of the night had lifted slightly, replaced by the damp chill. Eager to explore the crystal-clear lake marked on Leo's map, we packed daybacks. The trail, faint to begin with, vanished completely within minutes in the soupy fog. Ben, navigating with a compass, insisted we were heading downhill towards water. But the slope felt wrong, steeper, choked with unfamiliar, thorny undergrowth that snagged our clothes and scratched our skin. Hours bled away. The promised lake never materialized. Instead, the forest grew denser, darker. The trees here were different, twisted, black-barked sentinels draped in thick gray moss that hung like cobwebs. The air grew still and heavy, smelling of damp, earth and something vaguely metallic. That's when the sound started again. Not just rumbles now, but high-pitched chittering and the unsettling scrape of claws on bark, always just out of sight, always above us. Once, I caught a flash of matted, dark fur and glowing, greenish eyes peering down from a high branch before vanishing. Panic, cold and sharp, began to replace our initial frustration. We were undeniably lost, and we were not alone. Sarah tried to keep us focused, retracing steps, but every direction looked the same in the fog and oppressive gloom. The towering peaks felt less like majestic scenery and more like the walls of a vast, natural prison. The fog never truly lifted. It just thickened into a permanent, gloomy twilight beneath the canopy. Exhaustion weighed on us like stones. We tried to head back towards where we thought the campsite was, but the forest seemed to shift. Landmarks disappeared. Our compasses spun erratically. It was Maya who spotted the first deep gouges in the black bark, higher than any bear could reach. 3 parallel slashes. Then Ben found the remnants. Shredded nylon from a tent flap, caught on a thorn bush far from our camp. It wasn't ours. That night, they came closer. We huddled in a small, defensible hollow between giant roots, a tiny fire our only shield against. The deepening dark. The chittering became shrieks, sharp and alien. Shapes moved in the periphery, hunched, agile things that seemed to flow through the branches rather than climb. We saw glimpses, elongated limbs ending in wicked, curved claws, leathery skin stretched over unnatural frames, and those same unsettling green eyes reflecting the firelight with predatory intelligence. One dropped onto the path just meters away, a nightmare of sinew and shadow, letting out a hiss that froze the blood in my veins before it bounded back up into the darkness with terrifying speed. Leo tried to shout to scare it, but his voice cracked. Sarah gripped her hiking pole like a spear, her knuckles white. Ben was silent, trembling. We were trapped, utterly exposed beneath a ceiling of hostile branches. Sleep was impossible. Every rustle, every snapped twig sent jolts of terror through us. The fire felt pitifully small. Dawn came gray and muted. The creatures seemed to retreat, with the deepest dark, but their presence lingered like a foul odor. We were weak, hungry, and on the razor's edge of despair. Arguing flared. Leo wanted to charge blindly downhill. Ben wanted to climb a tree for a vantage point. A terrifying prospect. Sarah urged caution and rationing our dwindling supplies. Maya, however, was quiet, staring intently at the moss. On the trees. It grows thicker on one side, she whispered, her voice hoarse but clear. Always the north side. Even here. Hope, fragile but real, flickered. Using the moss as a rough guide, ignoring the unreliable compasses, we chose a direction, perpendicular to the slope we remembered descending. We moved like ghosts, silent and alert, flinching at every sound. The forest remained oppressive, the unseen things still tracking us from above, their chittering a constant, nerve-shredding soundtrack. We found a small, icy stream, not the lake, but flowing water. We followed it downhill. The logic being water had to go somewhere. The descent was brutal. The creatures grew bolder as daylight faded again, shadows flitting just beyond vision, throwing rocks that clattered nearby. Once, a heavy shape landed on the path behind us, letting out a guttural challenge. We ran, stumbling, driven by pure adrenaline, the stream our only guide. Just as despair threatened to consume us once more, the trees thinned, the awful, clinging mist began to dissipate. We burst out onto a scree slope, gasping, beneath the open twilight sky. Below, impossibly far, but blessedly real, we saw the flickering lights of a ranger station near a road. We didn't stop. We scrambled, slid, and half ran down the treacherous slope, fueled by the last dregs of terror and the desperate hope of the lights. We didn't look back at the forest that rose like a jagged black wall behind us. We didn't need to. The echoing shrieks that chased us out of the tree line, filled with rage and frustration, were sound enough. We reached the station battered, bruised, and forever changed. The high peaks still stood, majestic and aloof in the moonlight, but we knew now what truly lived in their shadowed, tangled heart. The echoes of those shrieks, and the memory of glowing green eyes watching from the trees, followed us long after the mountains faded from view. We escaped the peaks, but the feeling of being prey, watched by something ancient and hungry amidst the pines, never truly left us.